Why did they all stop talking when she walked up? It wasn't shyness. It wasn't respect. It was something colder. The sun was barely climbing above the horizon when Avery Cole stepped through the gates of Naval Amphibious Base Coronado. The wet pavement reflected long orange shadows, the air heavy with the scent of saltwater and diesel fuel. 173 men stood in formation, their boots biting into the sand-colored asphalt, their breath steaming in the cool dawn. Avery took her place at the very end of the line. No hesitation, no scanning the faces for kindness. She knew what she was walking into. Eyes followed her instantly. Some narrowed in curiosity, others sharpened with judgment, and more than a few hardened into outright hostility. The whispers began before the first command of the morning. "Check the new girl," someone muttered. "Guess this program's a circus now." She heard it all. She always did. But she gave them nothing, not a smile, not a frown, not even a blink. Her cropped hair barely shifted in the sea breeze. No makeup, no bravado, just the steady weight of a woman who had built herself to withstand more than any of them could guess. Inside, she felt the familiar burn of focus, the kind that made everything else, the noise, the stares, slide away. They didn't know she'd scored in the top 5% of every physical assessment, that she'd demolished rifle qualification records, that she'd already survived 10 years as a Marine sniper, watching men die and making sure others didn't. None of it mattered here. In their eyes, she wasn't one of them. That was all they needed to know. The first day wasn't designed for welcome. It was designed to break people. They ran in deep. Sucking sand that swallowed ankles, they hit the surf zone. Cold Pacific water biting through skin and bone. The instructors barking commands above. The crash of waves, they shouldered logs slick with salt. 6-man carries that strained every tendon, except no one wanted Avery in their team. The silent agreement was clear. Make her work alone, let the weight crush her, watch her fail. But she didn't fail. When someone's grip faltered, she dug in harder. When they gave half their strength, she gave all of hers, quietly, without complaint. By the time the sun set, she was blistered, salt-burned, and every muscle screamed, but her posture stayed. Unbroken, the chow hall offered no reprieve. Men clumped at long tables, trading jokes and war stories. Avery sat alone, no invitations, no nods. The instructors didn't treat her differently. They didn't have to. Her classmates were doing the job for them. During drown-proofing, hands and feet bound, body forced to survive in water longer than reason allowed, one instructor made eye contact with the swim coach and quietly extended her time. No stopwatch. No announcement, just silent calculation. Let's see how far she'd go. She lasted longer than either expected. When she surfaced, gasping but smiling faintly, the instructor's expression didn't change, but he never added time again. By the second week, the murmurs began to shift. She's still here? How the hell did she carry that log by herself? I heard she used to be Force Recon. Respect began to grow grudging, slow, and quiet. But acceptance never followed. What she got instead was silence. Then came Hell Week. 5.5 days of non-stop punishment. Hallucinations from sleep. Deprivation. Trench foot setting in by the second night. Skin rubbed raw from sand and salt. The surf became an enemy. The instructors drove them past exhaustion into something deeper, where pain became background noise and will was the only currency left. By hour 30, Avery's hands bled through her soaked gloves. By hour 50, her toenails were gone. She vomited twice from surf torture and once after a forced march, but never stopped moving. The instructors watched her now not to help her, but to see if she'd finally collapse the way they had predicted on the final night, with maybe 4 hours left. A high-ranking officer she hadn't seen all week pulled her aside. His voice was low, edged with exhaustion. "Cole, you've done enough. We're going to mark you down as a success. You've proven what you need to." She frowned. "Is this an order, sir?" "No," he said, his jaw tightened. "It's a strong suggestion. You don't need to finish this last evolution. Go home. Leave with your head high." Avery studied his face. The salt wind carried the noise of the others' grunts, shouts, the slap of water against boots, but in that moment, everything narrowed to the quiet between them. Then she turned, walked back to her boat crew, and resumed her position. She finished Hell Week. No ceremony, no handshake, no congratulations. Just a note in her file and a brief conversation behind. A closed door with the commanding officer of the training command. "You've got the heart, Cole," he said, eyes fixed on his desk. "But there's politics, you understand. Even if you graduate, they'll never put you on a team." She understood. She'd always understood. They wouldn't let her wear the trident, not because she couldn't earn it, but because they didn't know what to do when she did. 2 days. Later, she was gone. Quiet discharge from the pipeline. No record of failure, no press release. Just a transfer form and a silence that echoed louder than any weapon. Most thought she quit. Some believed she'd realized she didn't belong. Only a few would ever learn the truth. She hadn't left because she couldn't finish. She'd left because she'd already survived something harder enduring it without. Becoming like them, and somewhere far from Coronado, beneath a desert sun, within the scope of a rifle, a real war was just beginning. She left the base the way she arrived, silent, unceremonious. Her name vanished from rosters, from hallways, from the mouths of men she had bled beside. She didn't argue, didn't post about it, didn't explain. There was nothing to explain. For 2 months, no one heard her name, but 6,000 miles away, buried in the chaos along Syria's fractured borders, whispers began, in a forward operating base near Bir ez-Zor, a private contractor team, mostly ghosts from wars no one talked about, passed around rumors about a sniper, a phantom, no name, no background, just results. A single shot through a tank gunner's eye slit at 800 meters. Another dropping a rooftop sentry mid-prayer. Wind howling so hard it bent flags. No scope glare, no signature. Some said CIA. Others swore ex-Israeli military. The truth was simpler. Avery Cole had found her war. She was embedded under a private security outfit, subcontracted through layers of shell companies. No formal command, no jurisdiction. Just a rifle, a contract, and orders. Provide overwatch and target suppression for recon teams in hostile zones. Her first mission came outside Al-Bukamu, an IED convoy parked near a known arms dealer's estate. 2 high-value targets about to vanish. Local assets refused to go in. The contractors were pinned under heavy machine gun fire. Avery set up. On a hillside, 900 yards out, she lay prone for 2 hours without moving, reading wind, heat shimmer, and the dance of shadows through a crumbling cityscape. When the sun hit just right, she pulled the trigger. 1 shot, then 2 more, 3 targets down. The last bullet passed through an open sunroof, ending a man mid-sentence. The team never saw her. They only heard the crack sharp, clean, final, and then the silence that followed. No one bought her a drink afterward. No one even knew where she'd gone. She disappeared into her corner tent at the edge of base. No flag, no rank, no chatter. She didn't drink, didn't tell stories, didn't try to belong. She cleaned her rifle, cleaned her boots, slept. Sometimes she was gone before sunrise. Other times she lingered, quietly loading gear as teams rolled out. Unaware she was even there until things got too quiet in the field, and men started realizing they felt safe again. It was the kind of safety no airstrike could promise. The kind that came from knowing someone unseen had already seen the danger before it saw you, and slowly, without trying, Avery Cole began to earn a new name. They didn't say it to her face, but when she passed in the dark, they nodded to each other. Whispers here, we're good. She didn't mind the nickname. In fact, she preferred it, because Avery Cole, the woman the SEALs had sent home, was gone. What remained was something sharper, colder, quieter. War had welcomed her without question, and for the first time in years, through the crosshairs of a rifle, she felt it again, purpose. What made them start looking over their shoulders when she was around? It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was the quiet weight of knowing someone had already seen what could kill you before you did. By her 3rd month in Syria, Avery Cole had become less a soldier and more a rumor. No unit claimed her. No command assigned her. She appeared when the mission needed a miracle and vanished when it was done. Some called her a sniper, others a ghost. To those who'd watched her work through the green haze of night vision, there was only one name that made sense: whisper. She moved like silence itself, unseen, unheard, but always there. She never slammed the door, never let light betray her, never left footprints in soft dirt if she could help it. When she spoke over comms, if she spoke at all, it was low, firm, and steady, like a lullaby wrapped in steel. During one operation outside Palmyra, a recon team was pinned on a rooftop. 4 hostiles closed in fast. Their comms went frantic, screaming coordinates, calling for air support, for anything that could pull them out. Before headquarters could even respond, the line went quiet. Then came 3 soft cracks, seconds apart, then a 4th, 4 shots, 4 bodies, 4 lives saved. Overwatch says. It's clear, came a calm female voice that night. No one asked who she was. They just started logging her in the mission reports as Desert Whisper. The name spread not on social media, not in official briefings, but in the spaces between operations, where stories traveled faster than bullets. Across mess tables, at border checkpoints, in the notebooks of foreign advisors trying to understand why men who should have died were coming back alive. Her legend grew in fragments. Some said she never slept, always lying somewhere under a tarp, one eye through the scope. Others swore she once dropped 3 targets with a single shot, the bullet passing clean through armor and into a warlord's meeting. They argued about whether she could shoot the laces off a boot without grazing skin. Avery never corrected them. She never confirmed or denied. She just kept showing up. Inside her rifle case, folded into the lining, was her kill log, not a list of numbers, not a boast, but names, the faces she'd studied before each shot. She wrote them down to remember, not to glorify the kill, but to carry the weight of it. Precision wasn't just skill, it was consequence. That's what made her different from most soldiers. Orders didn't drive her trigger finger. Understanding did. She knew exactly who was behind the crosshairs and what they'd done or were about to do. One mission came with no briefing, no lead time, a moving arms shipment. Heavy resistance expected. The team wanted to delay. Too risky, too much unknown. But Avery had already moved into position 2 hours before dawn. Her voice crackled over comms. 3 rooftop threats. Targets will be neutralized in 60 seconds. Go. The commander hesitated, glancing at his watch. Then 1, 2, 3 clean shots. Proceed, she confirmed. The team swept through with 0 resistance, shipment secured, no casualties. Back at base, there were no thank yous. They didn't have to say it. Instead, someone handed her a canteen filled with coffee and nodded quietly as she passed. Respect like that didn't come from medals or stripes. It came from being the reason someone came home instead of in a body bag. Her gear never changed much. No high-speed plate carriers, no flashy optics, just her old ghillie wrap, a weathered USMC sniper pack, and a bolt-action rifle so worn it looked like it belonged in a museum. A Frankenstein of parts she'd carried since Afghanistan. The grip carved with small notches, not for kills, but for mission survived. There were a lot of notches. 1. Mike Griggs, the old operator missing 2 fingers, sat near her fire. Sparks drifted up into the dark. You always work alone? He asked, not looking at her. Only when they don't want me to fail, she said. He nodded once. He understood. A new commander arrived at the FOB a week later, full beard, crisp gear, fresh stripes. During his first briefing, he asked about local Overwatch assets. When Avery's file came up, he frowned. "She's not listed anywhere officially." "No, sir," someone said. "Well, who's her CO?" "She doesn't have one." The commander scoffed. "Everyone has one." Griggs finally looked up. Not whisper. The room went still. No one laughed. Not because they were scared, but because to them, she wasn't part of the unit. She was the unit's insurance policy. Months passed, missions blurred. Avery stayed the same, steady, deliberate, untouchable. She didn't write home. No one knew if she had anyone to write to. She kept a single photograph tucked into her packer. Marine sniper squad before the war ate them one by one. She didn't look at it often, but it was enough to remember why she kept showing up. She hadn't come for medals. She hadn't come for glory. She'd come for clarity, the kind that only existed at 1,000 yards. When time slowed, breath steadied, and the world narrowed to the whisper of a trigger. Then one morning, a single sheet of paper appeared in the operations tent. No cover, no signature, just a column of dates, locations, and distances, all confirmed kills, 62 in total. By noon, the tent was quiet. No one had seen her write it. No one needed to ask whose it was. A veteran ran a finger down the page, reading each line, each a moment where someone else could have died but didn't. A new guy, Ortega, stared at it with wide eyes. "You ever even see her shoot?" "Only once," Griggs said, "and she made the wind sit still." By sundown, the whispers began again, not about what she couldn't do, but about what she'd already done. 12 of those kills had been during high-volatility ops missions. So dangerous they bordered on suicide. 4 came at night in near-zero visibility. 1 happened in a sandstorm that grounded all aircraft for 3 days. The longest shot, 1,430 meters crosswind, through a window, striking a warlord in the throat as he stepped out of a car. "That's not luck," someone muttered. "That's not even training. That's something else." That evening, Ortega left a coffee outside her tent with a folded napkin. 3 words. "I read the sheet. Thank you." Avery found it at dawn. She didn't smile, but she drank the coffee. Within days, command caught wind of the kill sheet. They never said anything publicly, but things shifted. Supplies she'd been denied started arriving overnight. Her scavenged rifle parts showed up in sealed boxes. A dedicated encrypted channel was assigned to her Overwatch frequency, Echo 1 to 6. Her name began appearing in briefings, buried in footnotes. Overwatch, Echo 1 to 6, independent asset, high reliability. Adjust entry timing to align with scope confirmation. They didn't dare name her, but they couldn't ignore her. Avery didn't acknowledge the change. She still slept in the same tent, still ate alone, still cleaned her rifle after every mission, like it was a quiet ritual between life and death. But now, when she walked past, men gave her space, not out of fear, but reverence, because they understood what those numbers on that paper really meant. And deep down, Avery knew one thing. The trident they denied her had nothing to do with what she could do. She was already doing it. What did it feel like to know she was the only thing between them and a body bag? Some said it was luck. The ones who'd seen her work knew better. The mission in Haka proved it. A joint NATO-Kurdish operation that had gone bad almost before it began. Someone misread the enemy count 12 soldiers, now pinned behind the crumbled wall of an old stone house. No exit. 3 enemy snipers watching every angle. Every approach had turned into a kill box. Command hesitated. Even the most hardened voices on the radio carried that edge of uncertainty. And then, a voice cut through, calm, clear, female. Echo 1 to 6, visual acquired. 3 hostiles engaging. 10 seconds later, drone footage caught it all, a glint. In the distance, one sniper fell back, his rifle clattering off the roof. Second shot quieter, faster, third silent. Then nothing but the wind moving through an open window. The trap team walked out without a scratch. The next day, another kill sheet appeared in the operations tent. 3 new tallies, same neat handwriting, still unsigned. Griggs pulled it down and folded it into his notebook. No one asked why. Everyone understood. This wasn't just a list. It was a record of lives spared that would never make it into any official report. Not long after, she made the shot that cemented the unspoken truth. They had told her to leave SEAL training, but now they were standing on the ground. She kept clear. It happened outside Mosul. The team had been stacked outside a safe house, seconds from breach, when a suicide bomber on a motorcycle roared down a narrow alley toward them. In another 2 seconds, the blast radius would have swallowed everyone. But it didn't happen. The man was there, and then he wasn't half his head gone. The bike collapsing against a stone wall without an explosion. The operators froze. Where the hell? There was nothing to see. No movement on the rooftops. No muzzle flash in a window. Griggs, standing at the edge of the team, looked toward a distant ridge nearly a kilometer away, gave a small nod to himself, and murmured, "She's watching later, reviewing drone footage." It took 5 minutes to find the scope glint so faint it could have been dust. The shot had threaded between 2 power poles, missed a line of hanging laundry, and hit a moving target square in the temple from 1,247 yards. No one tried to explain it. They just added another silent mark to the mental ledger. That night, Avery wasn't in the debrief. She never was. Instead, she sat at the base perimeter, rifle across her lap, eyes fixed on the horizon as the desert bled into night. She'd already stripped and reassembled her rifle twice, not because it needed it, but because it kept her hands busy, her mind sharp. Focus. Was survival? Distraction got people killed. The old photograph was still in her pack, the one from her Marine sniper unit. Most of those faces were gone now. She rarely looked at it, but she never threw it away. Maybe because remembering them kept the war from becoming abstract. They had died clean, doing something that mattered. She could live with that. Men stopped trying to talk to her. Even the curious ones, new arrivals wanting to hear about the rumors, learned quickly that she didn't answer questions that weren't about the mission. But sometimes one of them would sit near her in silence, just close enough to feel the calm she carried, the quiet certainty that she would see the danger before it arrived. She didn't push them away. She understood loneliness, even if she didn't need company. One night, Ortega, the same young operator who'd once left her coffee, finally asked what he'd been carrying around for weeks. "Do you ever feel anything?" She didn't look up from her scope. "Sometimes." "What?" "Relief. If I don't shoot, someone else dies. Maybe 5 others. Maybe 10. He was quiet for a moment. "Doesn't it stay with you?" Avery turned her head toward him. Her eyes didn't blink, didn't flinch, but they weren't empty either. "It's supposed to." He didn't ask again. The next mission came from Raqqa hostage extraction. No air support. Too many civilians in the zone. Every path in was a choke point, but there was an apartment block at the edge of the combat zone. If someone could get to the top, they'd have the whole area covered. No one had to say it. Whisper. Would take the building. Before dawn, she moved alone through hostile streets, scaled the apartment's outer wall, and slid through a shattered window. Sand and dust shifted in the wind around her as she sat up in the dark. When the first rooftop sentry appeared, she had already ranged him. When a second emerged with a grenade launcher, her shot was already halfway there. By the time the ground team moved in, calling out sniper status was muscle memory. Overwatch secure, proceed, no emotion, no pride, just confirmation. After the mission, intercepted enemy comms carried a panicked voice in Arabic. "We can't move. The sky has a shadow. It sees everything." They had given her another name, Al-Zilalak, the silent shadow. She never heard it. She was already back in her tent, cross-checking her shots, not to relive them, but to confirm them. Precision wasn't about glory. It was discipline. And the men on base were finally starting to understand. Whisper wasn't just good. She was something else entirely. She didn't need them to cheer. She just needed to know the shot had counted. And if they ever forgot who she was or why she mattered, they only had to look to the ridgeline, because that's where she'd be, breath steady, eyes calm, waiting. Why did command send a SEAL to see her instead of an email? Because a report couldn't answer the question they were really asking. It was official, on-paper advisory review of field overwatch assets, a formality, they called it, just a check-in. But everyone at Firebase Oran knew what it really was. Avery Cole had become too loud in her silence. Her name was surfacing in NATO field reports, mission debriefs, even whispered back home in offices where her file didn't technically exist. Always coded, never direct, but there was a pattern. And patterns made people in command nervous. Commander. Malcolm Rains stepped off the helicopter just after noon, his presence slicing through the base like a clean blade. Tall, tightly coiled, with the posture of someone accustomed to being saluted. He carried himself like he could bend the air around him if he wanted. Boots spotless, tan too fresh. He didn't smell like the desert yet. Men moved out of his way without being told. They'd seen his type before, clipboard commanders who ticked boxes, nodded at the right times, and left before the dust stuck to their uniforms. But this one wasn't here for them. He was here for her. He found her by the comms tent, sitting on an ammo crate with a rifle stretched across her knees, cloth in hand. The bolt lay on a rag beside her, cleaned so well it caught the light. She didn't look up when he stopped in front of her. "You're Avery Cole?" he asked. "You know who I am," she replied, eyes still on the metal in her hands. Rains crouched so they were eye level, forearms resting on his knees like a coach talking to an athlete who'd stopped following the playbook. "I've read every field report," he said. "I've seen the footage, the numbers." She still didn't look at him. "Did you come to congratulate me?" "No," he said. "I came to understand." That made her pause. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. Her eyes were steady, stripped of anything unnecessary, not cold, just certain. The kind of certain that unsettled men who relied on authority to feel tall. "You already understand," she said. "You just don't want to admit it." Rains didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his pack, pulled out a tablet, and turned it toward her. On the screen, her unofficial kill log. Dates, coordinates, distances, 68 tallies. 2 more than the last time the paper in the ops tent had been updated. "This is SEAL-level work," he said. "I know." "Then, why aren't you wearing the trident?" The question hung between them like a suspended round. It wasn't rhetorical. "You were never going to let me finish," she said, setting the bolt down. "The trident isn't about capability. It's about culture. And I wasn't what you wanted in the photo." Something in his face shifted barely. But it was there. "I passed Hell Week, passed dive phase, land nav, obstacle course, shot better than most of your candidates. You pulled me before the finish line and called it commendable. You didn't have the guts to say I passed, because then you'd have to explain why your elite teams suddenly had a woman on the roster." His jaw flexed, like chewing through something hard. "Times are different now," he offered. She gave a short, joyless laugh. "No, you're just quieter about it." Around them, operators pretended not to listen, but the slight angling of their bodies, the way conversation had thinned within 30 feet, told her they were tuned in. "You want to write your report?" she asked. "Write this. I left because I'm more useful out here. Because I don't need your patches or ceremonies to save lives. Because I'd rather be invisible and effective than visible and controlled." Rains didn't move. "That's the difference between me and the Navy," she continued. "You need paperwork to make something matter. I just need a rifle and a reason." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he stood, dust brushing from his knees. When he looked at her again, There was no anger, not even pity. Just the slow realization that everything they'd done to sideline her had only honed her into exactly what they were missing, and they could never take credit for it. He left an hour later. No debrief, no handshake. Just climbed into the helicopter and disappeared into the heat shimmer above the horizon like a man leaving a conversation with a ghost. When he got stateside, his report was one page. Subject: Avery Cole, unaffiliated Overwatch asset. Extraordinary marksmanship, tactical discipline, and strategic foresight. Recommendation: non-interference. Addendum: not fit for SEAL standards, she exceeds it. Final note: we told her to leave. We didn't realize we were sending her exactly where she belonged. It was marked classified and buried under layers of clearance. But word still spread. 2 nights later, the kill sheet in the ops tent was updated. 71 confirmed. Same handwriting, still unsigned. And when rookies asked who Whisper was, the veterans didn't explain. They just nodded toward the ridgeline and said quietly, "She was ours, and we let her go." It was the same week the package appeared. No markings, no return address. Just a plain box left on a crate by the landing zone, as if it had been dropped off by the wind. The quartermaster carried it to Griggs, because anything strange that wasn't for command, food or ammo, usually ended up belonging to her. Griggs stood with it in his hands for a long time before taking it to her tent. He set it just inside, didn't say a word, and left. When Avery returned later, she knelt beside it, hands pausing on the flap before she opened it slow, careful, like the contents might dissolve in the air. Inside, cushioned in black felt, was a medal. Unmarked, no ribbon, no citation. Just a brass disc polished to a dull shine, with a single trident etched in the center. Beneath it, a card. One line: "You were always one of us. We were just too blind to see it." No signature, but the handwriting belonged to someone who'd led men into places no map showed. She didn't smile, didn't cry. She closed the box, wrapped it in the felt again, and carried it to the edge of the base. There, a twisted tree grew alone in the sand, half dead. Half surviving? She dug a shallow hole at its roots and buried the metal, covered it with a single stone. It wasn't rejection. It was respect in the only way that made sense to her. Away from politics, away from cameras, away from any man who might wear it. Without bleeding the truth into the dirt like she had. Later, Ortega noticed the new stone under the tree. "What's that?" he asked. Griggs didn't look up. Something finally delivered on time. That night, Avery cleaned her rifle slower than usual. Her hands weren't heavy from fatigue. They were deliberate, almost ceremonial. She had never needed validation. But acknowledgement, the kind that came with no crowd, no speech, no ceremony, had arrived on her terms. And that meant something, even if she'd never wear it. What happens when the mission isn't about the shot you take, but the ones you don't? That was the kind of call Avery Cole understood better than most. The request came fast. Dropped into the ops tent in the middle of the night. Hostage extraction. Outskirts of Aleppo. Intel messy scrambled sources. Conflicting coordinates. A half-dozen red flags waved from the brief alone. Too many ways it could be a trap. Too many ways to walk into a kill zone without knowing it. Avery didn't wait for a final green light. While the ground team loaded gear, she was already circling the perimeter on her own. Moving under the cover of darkness she didn't need to see the inside of the target building to know how it would breathe. She read the angles from the rooftops, the way doors sat in their frames, which windows were cracked for airflow, and which had been nailed shut for reasons no one wanted to step inside and find out. By the time the convoy rolled into position, she had the perimeter mapped in her head. Her voice on comms was steady as concrete. 2 guards at the front, 1 inside the stairwell. 1 sniper, 3rd floor, east window. Don't move until I say go. 3 seconds later, 3 cracks cut through the night. Then her voice again. Go. The team moved like they'd been waiting their entire careers to hear that word from her. Inside, she called the turns like she was walking beside them. Left is clear. Move, pause, movement behind the door. Green light when they emerged. With the hostage, no one had a scratch. Later, the team lead came over her channel. That was textbook. Avery didn't reply. By now they knew her silence was punctuation. Back at the base, the old kill sheet had been replaced. Same neat handwriting, same columns, only now the total read 83. Still unsigned, but beneath the last line, in smaller letters than the rest, someone had written, "Not forgotten." The sheet stayed on the wall for weeks. Command never mentioned the metal buried under the tree. They never would, but something shifted anyway. Her supply requests were filled without delay. Specialized gear she hadn't even asked for started arriving gear that someone, somewhere, had decided she should have. Her comms clearance expanded to multiple zones without the red tape. Her Overwatch channel was patched directly into certain commanders' headsets during operations. Nobody said why. Nobody needed to. Whisper had become more than a sniper. She was a proof of concept. No one in the chain of command wanted to admit existed a living example that the system didn't always know what to do with greatness when it didn't fit the image. The war kept moving, and she moved with it. Her name, or rather the absence of it, passed quietly from team to team, base to base, not as a story told over beers, but in habits. Operators hesitating an extra second before stepping into a kill zone because they knew a shot might be coming. Commanders holding back from pulling rank if they thought the wrong woman might be in their crosshairs. She had become a lesson. The mission in Idlib showed why. It started like hundreds of others, intel on a convoy carrying high-value enemy commanders through a cluster of villages. Weather was bad, visibility poor, and civilians lined the route. Air support was denied. The call went to her. She moved before dawn, crawling into position under the brittle cover of winter brush. The ground was damp and cold, the kind that seeped into the bones if you let it. She didn't. Through the scope, she watched the convoy inch forward. 2 vehicles, a guard truck in front, a black SUV in back. In between, women and children on foot, used as cover. The kind of tactic designed to make a sniper hesitate. Her breath slowed, eyes narrowing. Every instinct said take the shot, but not at the lead vehicle, not yet. She waited. Then it happened. One man stepped out from the SUV, scanning rooftops with the kind of slow patience that meant he knew she might be there. He was searching for her without knowing her name. She held her fire. The ground team later said they never saw what she saw, how he shifted his position just enough to put the civilians out of the blast radius before he lifted a hand to signal the other truck forward. That was when she took him. One shot. He fell. Backward. The convoy broke into chaos, but the civilians scattered to safety. The guard truck peeled away without returning fire, too disoriented to mount a defense in the debris. No one asked why she hadn't taken the earlier shot. Maybe they knew. Maybe they didn't want to admit they hadn't seen what she saw. The new kill sheet appeared 2 days later. Same handwriting, same precision that night. She stayed outside longer than usual, watching the sky go from black to ash gray. Ortega found her there. He didn't speak at first, then. You could have ended it faster today. She didn't take her eye off the horizon. Faster isn't always better. He nodded slowly, not because he understood, but because he trusted her enough not to press further. And that was the thing by then. They didn't just trust her aim. They trusted her judgment. Even the ones who had once doubted she belonged. It was the trust of people who'd stopped seeing her as a novelty or an anomaly. They saw her for what she was, essential. What happens when the system that pushed you out starts quietly building itself around you? That was the part no one talked about. It began so subtly most people on base didn't even notice. Briefings started including extra maps, not for the teams, but for her. Patrol schedules shifted by an hour or two, but no one explained why, except that it lined up with when Whisper could get eyes on the ridge before the team stepped off. Commanders began delaying entry times until she confirmed on comms, Overwatch secure, and then came the line in a NATO. Special Operations Manual Section 12B, buried deep where only the planners looked. Long-range Overwatch integration. Non-affiliated marksmen with sustained field effectiveness may be considered for mission-critical shadow Overwatch roles. No one admitted who wrote it, but Griggs saw the language and smiled without humor. They weren't creating a new role. They were naming one she'd already been filling. Still, they never named her. And maybe that was why she kept going one evening. She was running a solo recon crawl outside a crumbling industrial complex in northern Aleppo. Intel said the area was abandoned. Avery's instinct said otherwise. She moved low through the dust, the shadow of her ghillie hood barely breaking the outline of the rubble. Through the scope, she caught it a glint faint, half hidden behind a window on the far building. Another sniper, already ranged in, already waiting for the ground team. That hadn't even left base yet. She didn't fire immediately. She watched, waited, saw the man shift, readjust his aim to the only street wide enough for a vehicle. That was when she took him clean, single shot. The report went back up the chain tagged as preemptive neutralization, but among the operators, they just called it Whisper doing her job. Her influence spread in ways she didn't intend. New team leads started factoring her into their own planning without asking. Junior operators began running their own field scans differently after watching how she worked slower, more deliberate, treating every shot like it had a cost. And then came the mission in Kobani, a supply route deep in hostile territory. 3 villages chained along a single dirt road, multiple IED points suspected, but satellite coverage was spotty. The ground team would have to move fast, but if they missed even one, the entire convoy could be lost. Avery had been in position since the night before, shifting her perch 3 times to cover the entire stretch without leaving blind spots. She'd already spotted 2 devices by sunrise. She didn't shoot at the triggerman. She didn't have 2. She simply called their positions, her voice in the commander's ear, redirecting vehicles before anyone even saw the danger. The team made it through without a scratch. When they returned, a new sheet was pinned to the ops tent wall. No kills this time. Just coordinates and a simple note in the margin. Not all saves are counted in tallies. Griggs read it twice before folding it into his notebook with the others. Weeks later, the order came from higher up, an official request for her to be reassigned under direct NATO command. It was the kind of offer that came with better gear, guaranteed extraction protocols, even a choice of deployment zones. She turned it down before the sentence was finished, the officer delivering. The message blinked. "You're refusing NATO clearance?" She nodded. "You put me in a roster. You put me in a chain of command. And then I'm just another name you can move on a chart." He didn't argue. People rarely did anymore. But turning it down wasn't without consequences. A refusal drew attention from the kind of people who didn't like being told no. Within days, she knew someone was going to show up to try and change her mind. When they did, it wasn't an officer. It was a man in civilian clothes, clean-shaven, polite in that unsettling way certain intelligence types could be. He found her at the edge of base, leaning against a twisted tree where the buried metal lay. "You've built something here," he said. "You could do more with more resources. Different targets, different reach, different leash," she replied. He studied her for a long moment. "There's not many like you. There are more than you think," she said. "You just don't see them because they don't fit your picture." When he left, she knew she'd just made herself harder to control and more valuable at the same time. 2 days later, the next mission came, a raid on a safe house rumored to be coordinating attacks across 3 provinces. The ground team was already stretched thin. Air cover wasn't an option. She was in place hours before they moved in, perched above a broken wall with a perfect view of both the front and rear exits. The fight went bad fast. More hostiles than expected, heavier fire, tighter angles. She could hear the shift in the team's breathing overcomes panic edged with exhaustion. Her shots came in measured intervals, each one carving space for the team to move. Not rapid fire, not flashy, just deliberate, necessary, surgical. When it was over, the team lead keyed the mic. Overwatch status? Her voice was as steady as the first time they'd heard it. All accounted for area cold. Back at base. No one celebrated. They didn't need to. The sheet on the wall told the story. New coordinates, new distances, new marks. And in the quiet between missions, the operators began to understand something. Whisper wasn't just covering them anymore. She was shaping how they fought. What do you do when the people who once doubted you start relying on you more than they admit? For Avery Cole, that was the moment she knew it was almost over. By the 7th month in Syria, Whisper wasn't just part of the mission plans. She was the unspoken foundation they were built on. Roots were drawn knowing she'd have the high ground. Extraction points were chosen with her sightlines in mind. Teams timed their movements to the rhythm of her voice over comms. No one put it in writing, no one dared. But if Whisper wasn't on Overwatch, the tempo of an op slowed. The men moved more cautiously, checked their corners twice, second-guessed. Their routes, she had become the variable they couldn't control, but couldn't imagine losing. It was exactly the kind of dependency she didn't want. She'd seen what happened when a unit leaned too heavily on one person. The day that person wasn't there, the cracks turned into fractures, and fractures got people killed. The mission. That proved it came in the desert outside Manbij. Intel said it was a quick in-and-out capture of a mid-tier commander. 2 bodyguards. No heavy weapons. The plan was clean, almost too clean. That was the first warning sign. Avery moved into position before dawn. Setting up on the slope of a rocky hill, the sun came up behind her, hiding her outline in the glare. Through the scope, she scanned the compound. It looked quiet. Too quiet when the team breached the outer gate. She saw the movement before they did. A shadow slipping along the side wall. The glint of glass in the man's hand. Not a weapon, a radio. She fired once. The radio dropped with him. Seconds later, an armored technical rolled out from behind the compound, a mounted DSHK tearing into the courtyard. The op erupted into chaos. Avery's first 3 shots took out the gunner, the driver, and the man trying to take the gunner's place. Her 4th dropped the spotter, calling in reinforcements from the roof. The team extracted, shaken, but intact. When they got back, Ortega approached her tent. He didn't knock. If you hadn't been there? He started, but didn't finish. That's the problem, she said. He frowned. What problem? You can't run ops like I'm always going to be there. Ortega didn't have an answer. He just stood there, like he'd heard something he didn't want to understand. 2 nights later, she left the base alone. No rifle, just her pack. She moved along the perimeter until she reached the twisted tree. The stone marking the buried metal was still there. She sat beside it for a long time, her hands resting on her knees, eyes fixed on the horizon. She wasn't thinking about leaving the war. She was thinking about leaving them. The next day, she was on Overwatch for a hostage rescue west of Raqqa. 12 civilians in a warehouse, guarded by 8 armed men. The team moved in smooth until an unmarked pickup rolled up on the south side. 3 more hostiles inside. She had a clean shot on all 3. She took none of them. Instead, she keyed her mic. South side, 3 incoming. I'm not covering you. The silence on the other end was sharp. You're going to clear your own exit, she added. They did. Clumsily. Almost too late, but they did it. That night, Ortega came to her again, eyes tight with frustration. You could have saved us a lot of trouble today. "You need to save yourselves," she said. It was the last time they spoke more than a sentence. Over. The next 2 weeks, she started stepping back, still taking the missions, still making the shots, but letting the smaller threats pass to the teams, letting them relearn the edges of their own capabilities. Some noticed. Most didn't until the day she was gone. The ridge where she usually set up was empty. No glint of glass, no movement under a tarp, no voice on the comms. They called for her anyway. Whisper, "Do you copy?" Nothing but wind. They held position longer than they needed to, part of them hoping she was watching without answering. But when the mission ended, her tent was still stripped bare. The stone under the tree was untouched, but her presence had lifted like a shadow that had finally stepped out from the ground. Pinned to the wall inside her tent was a single envelope. No name, no rank. Just a line written in black ink. I never needed the uniform. I needed the mission. Beneath it, a list of coordinates. 10 digits each, villages, supply routes, places forgotten in the layers of red tape where no overwatch existed, where no one was looking. It wasn't a goodbye. It was a redirect. She hadn't quit. She'd moved beyond them. What happens to a story when the person at the center of it refuses to tell it? It starts telling itself. Avery Cole didn't vanish the way deserters did. There was no trail of rumors about her hiding out, no grainy photos in markets half a continent away. She simply stepped out of the frame and kept walking until the people who'd once watched for her couldn't see her anymore. But the legend didn't leave with her. Ortega was the first to break the silence. Months later, in a closed-door Pentagon review, he sat across from officers in starched uniforms and polished shoes and told them what they didn't want to hear. You tried to keep her out because she was different. That difference saved all of us more than once. He wasn't alone. Names started surfacing: operators, pilots, foreign intelligence liaisons, all telling pieces of the same truth. There was a sniper with no rank, no unit patch, and a kill. Count higher than some battalions, who'd covered missions that should have ended in body bags. And then came the journalist. He wasn't military anymore, once a combat photographer, now chasing stories no one else would touch. He'd been embedded with Kurdish fighters when he saw it. A single clean shot that ended an ambush before it began. No origin, no flash, no follow-up, just a sudden safety where death had been seconds away. He followed the whispers across the region, stories of a woman they called the Wind's Eye, of aid convoys reaching their destinations untouched, of ambushes dying in the silence between a breath and a shot. The piece he wrote never named her, never showed her face, but it carried a headline the operators recognized immediately. They told her to leave SEAL training, then went silent at the sight. Of her rifle's kill count, it went viral in less than a day. The Navy didn't release a statement. How could they? To confirm her existence was to admit they'd cast her aside. But in an almost invisible amendment to the Special Operations Manual, the phrase appeared: recommended non-traditional assets, in the footnotes language no one outside the community would think twice about. Non-affiliated marksmen with sustained field effectiveness may be considered for mission-critical shadow overwatch roles. Griggs knew the wording. He also knew the blueprint it described. Somewhere deep in NATO's operational web, a new unit was forming. Not official, not listed. They called it Project Whisper. Its purpose wasn't to create more Averys. It was to stop losing the ones they already had, to listen for them, to find them, to let them work without forcing them into shapes they didn't fit. Because now there was proof. A woman had redefined elite without the trident, without the ceremony, without the system that hadn't known what to do with her. She had saved the lives of the same people who doubted her, and though she was gone, she wasn't gone. Some said she was still in the mountains, crossing borders without being noticed, watching over patrols that didn't even know they were being covered. Others swore she'd taken to the cities, setting up in forgotten high-rises where her shots could fall like lightning on anyone who threatened the ground below. They said her rifle never missed, that she didn't speak unless the mission required it, that the only way you knew she'd been there was because no one died. When young recruits asked if she was real or just a myth, Ortega would lean forward, voice low but certain. She was real, and she was better than all of us, somewhere out there beyond the satellite maps, beyond the secure comms and neat grids of a command center. A scope steadied, a breath drew slow. The world held still for 1 second longer than it should, and then came the shot. No medals, no broadcast, no tally made public, just another invisible mark on the wall of a woman who never needed approval. Only purpose, and in that purpose, she had become something the Navy could never contain. A legend by her own hand. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.